Hello and welcome back again to Archaeology 101. In today's video I'm going to be discussing the prehistory of violence in Europe. Violence in prehistory is an increasingly recognised area of discussion in archaeology papers. The past few decades have begun to address this, utilising a mixture of skeletal analysis, artefact assemblages and good old-fashioned guesswork. A key phrase you'll see being thrown around when talking about prehistoric violence is interpersonal violence, which basically means a human attacking another human. Violence can be hard to prove, as it requires a body and for that body to retain evidence of conflict, which can heal completely if occurring in childhood, for example, when the bones are more malleable, or can be impossible to determine amongst the mishmash of other ailments and accidents that are more natural that occur in a human's life, such as falls. I did say that we could imply violence from tools that we find. A stone axe, for example, can split a skull open, but it can also be used to fell a tree, and it is seldom heard of to find a stone axe still found lodged in a human skull. Direct links are required to make a direct interpretation. The skeletal record can be quite elusive when it comes to older prehistoric sites during the Paleolithic, for example. Nevertheless, there are a few key case studies that do show interpersonal violence, and I will go through some of these case studies now, going through different periods of prehistory. It's very interesting to consider ancient violence, but even more so when it involves a more archaic human, pre-sapiens. It is most likely a given that all human species, including the Australopithecines, engaged in interpersonal violence of some kind against group members and outsiders alike for varying reasons. We see apes today, such as chimps, engaging in violence for various reasons, including hostile takeover of troops, territory, and mating. One of the best examples of pre-sapiens violence is from Cemetery La Huesos in Spain, where a 400,000-year-old skeleton of a Heidelbergensis was found. This is also scattered amongst much later bones of Heidelbergensis as well. But this one individual displays multiple blows to the head, which has fractured its skull severely, demonstrating extreme aggression by an attacker who successfully killed its opponent. The reason why this individual was killed is unknown, but it could have been for one of the reasons chimps kill other chimps, or perhaps there are more socially complex reasons at play here. The execution of this individual was certainly savage, but as Homo species evolved, so did their technology and in how they could kill. A Neanderthal individual from Israel known as Shanadar III displayed a lesion on his rib, indicating he took a sharp, pointed object through the lung. One report even claims that it may have been a wooden point rather than a stone tip. Interestingly so, the individual did not immediately perish, and he survived weeks, if not months. It's uncertain, but presumably he died succumbing to his wound. The conclusion of this report was that the murder weapon was a thrown projectile, perhaps a sharpened stick, which has led to discussion of conflict between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Sapiens are more well known for being able to throw projectile weapons, but equally this could have been a hunting accident thrown by an unwitting hunting partner, or even a hostile Neanderthal displaying previously unknown and unusual dexterity. The concept of two different lineages of human conflicting against each other is fascinating, but one which has very little merit beyond this one possible example. But as we develop our understanding of different human species and their interactions, this is definitely a space to watch. From what we can gather, most conflicts are internal to the species. Sungia 1 is a mid-Upper Paleolithic burial in Russia of a 50-plus-year-old adult male sapiens. This individual is already unusual because he's been buried with very rich grave goods, including thousands of ivory beads and pendants. There are other unusually rich graves, including children at the same site, but this individual would appear to have been stabbed, much like Shanadar III, however this time most likely with a stone spear or knife, which had peered through the first thoracic vertebra. Again, accidental death cannot be completely ruled out, or even perhaps sacrifice, but what separates this individual from the previous example is that we can overtly see he was buried with care, perhaps demonstrating a grieving group burying their fellow who has fallen in some conflict. On the continent after 10,000 BC, the Mesolithic begins, and with the Mesolithic, in some areas you can find small cemeteries, although this is not known everywhere in Europe. One example is Vedbæk in Denmark, which I have spoken about in my Mesolithic episode. There are other early cemeteries also in the Danube region, for example. A site called Vlazak produced numerous individuals with injuries ranging from parry-fractures of the arm to the more telling stone projectile points still lodged in a deceased pelvis. Even though these individuals were buried in the same cemetery, this was stretched out over a space of time, meaning that these were quite isolated incidents. However, once the Neolithic begins to spread in Europe and people live sedentary lifestyles instead of arable land for themselves, things appear to change for the worst. Admittedly, we have a larger skeletal record in Neolithic societies, but seeming as people become sedentary, the violence appears to rise as well, as farming groups appear to clash with one another, possibly due to things such as expanding populations and demand on resources. These stress factors are thought to produce more intensive conflicts, which turn into massacres in some cases. The German site of Talheim is a commonly cited case study of European Neolithic conflict. Talheim is a mass grave containing 34 individuals, 16 of these children, 9 males and 7 women. Most of them had died due to blunt trauma, generally to the head, most likely from stone axes, with some also felled by stone-tipped arrows. This has often been interpreted as one group of farmers wiping out another group of farmers, perhaps due to disputing resources such as fertile land. What I would like you to take away from this video is that humans have been hitting each other for a very long time for various reasons, many of which we can only guess at for why. However, we should also be careful when labelling reasons for conflict and exercising caution in overly zealous interpretations for violence, when we cannot truly understand the society as a whole when we are speaking from our isolated point in time. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time on Archaeology 101.